You get the email, or maybe it's your manager calling you into their office with that specific tone that's somehow both casual and serious. However it happens, the message lands. You're getting a raise. And for exactly 72 hours, maybe a week if you're really savoring it, you feel incredible. You feel validated. You feel like all those extra hours and uncomfortable projects and times you bit your tongue in meetings finally meant something tangible. You start doing the math in your head. Maybe it's an extra $400 a month, maybe $600. You think about what that could mean. Finally building up savings, or taking that vacation you've been postponing, or just, honestly, not feeling that little spike of anxiety every time you check your bank account balance. But then something strange happens. 6 months go by, maybe a year, and that raise has just evaporated. You're not traveling more. Your savings account looks basically the same. You're still living paycheck to paycheck or close to it. The money came, it went somewhere, but you can't actually point to where. It's like it dissolved into your life without leaving a trace. And here's the part that really fascinates me. My name's Oliver, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, human behavior, and why some people seem to build wealth almost accidentally, while others work just as hard and stay financially stuck for decades. This disappearing raise phenomenon isn't random at all. It's actually one of the most predictable patterns in personal finance, and almost nobody sees it coming because we're all kind of trained to think about money in this very specific, very broken way. Because what I've noticed is that most advice around raises is either uselessly obvious, just save it, or completely detached from how real life actually works. Nobody talks about the psychological weight of suddenly having more money. Nobody talks about how your brain is literally wired to sabotage you at this exact moment. Nobody mentions that getting a raise is actually one of the most financially dangerous moments you'll experience, not because something bad happens, but because of what you're about to let slip away without even realizing it. What I want to do today is show you something different. Not a lecture about budgeting, not some guilt trip about your spending habits, but an actual framework for thinking about raises that most people never encounter until they're in their 40s or 50s, looking back and wondering why they don't have more to show for all those salary bumps over the years. This is about understanding something fundamental about how money actually works in your life. Not in theory, not in spreadsheets, but in your day-to-day reality where emotions and expectations and comparisons and exhaustion all play a role. So let's start with the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to hear. Lifestyle creep is not a personal failing. It's not about being weak-willed or bad with money or lacking discipline. Lifestyle creep is actually your brain doing exactly what evolution designed it to do, adapting to your current circumstances and recalibrating what feels normal. Think about it this way. You're making, let's say, $55,000 a year. You have an apartment that costs roughly a third of your take-home income. You go out to eat maybe twice a week, cook the rest of the time. You buy clothes when you need them, but you're not exactly shopping for fun. You drive a car that's reliable but not impressive. And most importantly, this is the key part, you have this whole mental map of what you can and cannot afford. These rules are so deeply embedded you don't even consciously think about them anymore. You just know, instinctively, that certain things are for other people, people who make more than you. Then you get a 7% raise, about $320 more per month after taxes. That's real money. That should change things, right? But here's what actually happens, and this is where it gets genuinely interesting from a psychological perspective. Your brain doesn't process that $320 as bonus money or extra. Within about 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes even faster, your brain recalibrates. That $300 becomes your new baseline. It becomes what you make now. And all those unconscious rules about what you can afford, they shift too. Not dramatically, not in one big obvious decision, but quietly, gradually, in 100 tiny ways you don't even register. Maybe you start getting delivery one extra time per week instead of cooking. That's $12, $15 you wouldn't have spent before, but it doesn't register as a big deal because, you got a raise, you earned it. Maybe you upgrade your Spotify to the family plan, or you add another streaming service, or you start buying the nicer toilet paper because the cheap stuff was always kind of awful and now you can finally justify the upgrade. Maybe you get your hair cut at a slightly nicer place. Maybe you buy the organic vegetables instead of regular ones. Maybe you stop checking prices quite as carefully at the grocery store. None of these individual choices is wrong. That's the insidious part. Each decision is totally reasonable, easily justified, almost virtuous in some cases, but they compound. And before you realize what's happening, that $320 is gone. Not stolen by one big purchase, but absorbed by 75 small unconscious upgrades to your baseline lifestyle. I had coffee with a friend last month, someone who's actually really financially literate, reads all the money books, has a whole color-coded spreadsheet system. And she was telling me about this exact thing. She'd gotten a pretty substantial raise at work, maybe 15%, and she was thrilled. She had this whole plan worked out. Half would go to savings, half would go to improving her quality of life. Very measured, very responsible. 4 months later, I asked her how it was going. She just kind of laughed, not a happy laugh, at self-aware, slightly bitter laugh where you're recognizing your own patterns. She couldn't actually account for where the money went. She was saving maybe $100 more per month, maybe, but not half the raise, not even a quarter. Her lifestyle had just quietly expanded to fill the extra space, like water finding its level. And here's what she said that really stayed with me. The weird thing is, I'm not buying anything big. I'm not being reckless. I'm just buying the next version up of everything. The slightly better version, the slightly more convenient version. And every single purchase makes sense in the moment, but they add up to basically my entire raise just vanishing. This is the core problem with how most people approach raises. They think the question is, what should I do with this money? But that's not the real question, because if you're asking it after the money hits your bank account, the game's already over. Your brain has already started adjusting. The question you actually need to be asking is, how do I protect this money from my own psychology? So here's what you actually do, and I know this is going to sound almost absurdly simple, but I promise it's the single most powerful financial move that most people never make. You intercept your raise before you ever see it. I'm talking about the exact moment you find out about the raise, before it shows up in your paycheck, before your brain has time to recalibrate your expectations, before you've mentally allocated it to anything. You make that money disappear from your visible cash flow, not in a sketchy way, in an automatic, structural way that removes the decision from your future self entirely. Let me walk you through this practically, because the specifics really matter. You find out you're getting a raise. Let's say it's 5%, which translates to about $350 more per month after taxes. Great news. Now, before that first bigger paycheck hits your checking account, you log into your company's benefits system and increase your 401k contribution by exactly that amount. Or, if you're already maxing that out, you set up an automatic transfer to a separate high-yield savings account. Or you increase your debt payments, whatever makes sense for your specific situation. The crucial thing is this: your checking account balance never changes. Your day-to-day spending money stays exactly the same. As far as your regular life is concerned, as far as your grocery shopping and your Friday night plans are concerned, the raise never happened. Now, I know what you're thinking. I can basically hear it. But Oliver, what's the point of working hard and getting a raise if I can't actually enjoy any of it? And listen, that's a completely legitimate question. It's the question that stops 90% of people from ever doing this, because it feels unfair, right? You worked for that raise. You earned it through late nights and difficult projects and navigating office politics. Why shouldn't you get to benefit from it now? And here's my answer, and I really want you to sit with this. You are benefiting from it, just not in the immediate dopamine hit way you're imagining. You're benefiting in the form of future security, future options, future freedom from the constant low-grade financial stress that's probably humming in the background of your life right now, even if you don't consciously notice it anymore. You're benefiting as the compound interest that's going to start working for you instead of against you. You're benefiting as the knowledge that you're actually making progress instead of just running faster on the same financial treadmill.
You're benefiting as the person you're going to be in 10 years who has actual choices instead of feeling trapped by your financial situation. But there's something else here, something darker that I think is worth talking about. By immediately absorbing a raise into your lifestyle, you're not just failing to save that money, you're actually doing something worse. You're raising your baseline expectations for what you need to be happy. You're making your future self require more money to feel the same level of contentment. There's this concept in psychology called the hedonic treadmill, the idea that people adopt incredibly quickly to positive changes in their life, and their happiness returns to a baseline level. You get a nicer apartment, and within 2 months, it just feels like your apartment. You get a better car, and within a few weeks, it's just your car. The initial joy fades. This happens with money too, obviously, but with money, it's actually more destructive because your satisfaction with your income isn't absolute. It's relative. It's based on comparison to your past self, to your expectations, to your peers. So when you get a raise and immediately inflate your lifestyle, you're not just missing out on saving, you're actively building a trap for yourself. You're teaching yourself that you need more to be satisfied. You're making it harder for your future self to ever feel financially secure.
Let's dig into the psychology here for a minute, because I think understanding this makes it easier to actually follow through. There's this concept in behavioral economics called mental accounting. The idea that we treat money differently depending on where it comes from or what category we've mentally assigned it to. And raises fall into this really weird psychological category. They're not quite found money, like a surprise tax refund or a birthday check from your grandmother, but they're also not quite regular income, like your base salary that you've been living on for months or years. They exist in this strange middle ground where they feel special, earmarked, deserving of being spent on something meaningful. And honestly, I completely get that impulse. When you get a raise, especially if you've been at the same salary for a while, it feels like validation. It feels like the universe or your company or your boss is saying, "We see your value." And there's this really human urge to celebrate that, to mark the occasion, to reward yourself with something tangible that represents this moment of recognition. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets a bit uncomfortable. That impulse is being driven entirely by your present self, the version of you that's excited and validated and wants that immediate hit of reward. Your present self is not thinking about your future self at all. Your present self isn't imagining the version of you that exists 5 or 10 years from now, looking at your financial situation and wondering why you don't have more saved despite getting regular raises throughout your career. This is what I think of as the raise paradox. The moment you get a raise is precisely the moment when you feel most deserving of spending money, but it's also the exact moment when saving that money will have the biggest impact on your long-term financial trajectory. Those two things are in direct conflict, and most people resolve that conflict in favor of their present self because, well, their present self is the one holding the decision-making power. So the solution, and I use that word carefully because it kind of feels like you're setting a trap for yourself, but in a good way, is to make the decision before your present self gets too attached to the idea of having that money available. You make it automatic, immediate, structural. You remove the decision point entirely. Now, let me pump the brakes here for a second, because I can feel some of you thinking, okay, but what if I genuinely need some of that raise money right now? And that's a fair pushback. First, let me acknowledge something important. Not everyone is in a position to redirect 100% of their raise. If you're legitimately struggling to pay your bills, if you're drowning in high-interest debt, if you don't have even a basic emergency fund, then yeah, you probably need at least some of that raise money for immediate necessities. And that's fine. This isn't about being dogmatic or following some rigid rule that doesn't fit your situation. But here's what I've noticed in talking to dozens of people about this. Most people who say they need their raise money don't actually need all of it for genuine necessities. What they need is maybe 30 or 40% of it for real-life improvements or breathing room. The rest they just want for lifestyle upgrades they've been mentally accumulating on their wish list.
And look, wanting things isn't wrong. I'm not here to tell you that you shouldn't improve your life or enjoy the fruits of your labor. But there's a difference between consciously choosing how to allocate your raise and unconsciously absorbing it into an inflated baseline that you won't even notice or appreciate 6 months from now. So here's a framework that I think works better for most people, and honestly, it's what I wish someone had told me years ago. The 50-30-20 rule for raises. And no, this isn't the traditional budgeting rule you might have heard of. This is different. When you get a raise, you split it 3 ways. 50% gets automatically redirected to savings, investments, or debt payoff, whatever your biggest financial priority is. 30% goes into a separate upgrade fund that you can use intentionally, thoughtfully for specific improvements to your life. And 20% flows into your regular checking account to give you a little more breathing room in your monthly budget. This way, you're not trying to pretend the raise doesn't exist. You're not white-knuckling it and denying yourself any benefit. You're acknowledging that, yeah, you worked hard and yeah, you deserve to see some improvement in your current quality of life. But you're also making sure that the majority of your raise is actually working for your future instead of just evaporating into unconscious lifestyle inflation. The key to making this work is that upgrade fund, by the way. You don't just let that 30% flow into your checking account where it'll get absorbed into random Target runs and DoorDash orders. You put it in a separate account, literally separate, where you have to make a conscious transfer to access it. And you use it for specific, intentional upgrades that you've actually thought about. Maybe after a few months, you've accumulated enough to buy that nicer mattress you've been wanting, or upgrade your laptop, or take a weekend trip somewhere. The point is, you're getting the psychological benefit of improving your life with your raise, but you're doing it consciously, in ways that you'll actually notice and appreciate instead of letting it dissolve into 1,000 tiny upgrades that you'll adapt to and forget about almost immediately. There's another layer to this that I think is worth talking about because it affects how we think about raises in ways we don't always recognize, and that's the social comparison element. When you get a raise, especially a significant one, there's often this subtle shift in how you perceive yourself relative to your peers. You're making more now. You've moved up a tier. And with that comes this almost unconscious pressure to signal that change, to demonstrate that you're doing well. Maybe you start going to slightly nicer restaurants when you meet friends for dinner because, you can afford it now, and you don't want to be the person who's always suggesting the cheap place. Maybe you upgrade your wardrobe a bit because you feel like you should look the part of someone at your new salary level. Maybe you move to a better neighborhood because it feels weird to be making good money and still living in the place you could barely afford when you were making 20% less. And here's the tricky thing about this. Some of these changes might actually be worth it. Moving to a safer neighborhood or investing in professional clothing that makes you feel more confident. These aren't frivolous wastes of money. The problem is that they're often driven by comparison and expectation rather than genuine preference. I remember talking to someone who'd gotten a big promotion and raise, and within 6 months he'd moved to a much more expensive apartment in a better part of the city. And when I asked him if he actually liked the new place more, he kind of hesitated. "It's fine," he said. "It's what people at my level do." And that phrase just stuck with me. What people at my level do. He wasn't moving because he genuinely wanted a different living situation. He was moving because he felt like his old apartment wasn't aligned with his new income. And the thing is, that's a trap. That's letting your financial decisions be dictated by some imaginary standard of what success at your income level is supposed to look like. And this is where I think a lot of raises disappear, not into conscious lifestyle upgrades that we've actively chosen, but into unconscious status signaling that we don't even particularly want or enjoy. We're just doing what feels like the natural next step for someone earning what we're earning. The way out of this, I think, is to get really honest with yourself about what you actually value versus what you feel like you're supposed to value. Do you actually care about living in that trendy neighborhood, or do you care about having a comfortable place that's close to the things you do regularly? Do you actually need the new car, or are you tired of feeling like your current car is beneath your new salary? These are uncomfortable questions because they require admitting that maybe we're more influenced by comparison and expectation than we'd like to believe. But they're worth asking because the answers can save you from absorbing your entire raise into lifestyle changes that don't actually make you happier.
Let me show you why this actually matters in concrete terms, because I think sometimes the long-term impact is hard to visualize when you're just thinking about a few $100s a month. Let's say you're 30 years old and you make $60,000 a year. Over the next 30 years until retirement, you get an average raise of 3% per year. Pretty standard for someone who's decent at their job and changes companies once or twice. By the time you're 60, you're making about $145,000 a year. Now, here's the first scenario. You do what most people do. Every time you get a raise, you unconsciously absorb it into your lifestyle. Your spending increases roughly in line with your income. By the time you retire, you're living a more comfortable life than you were at 30, sure, but you haven't saved significantly more than you were saving at the beginning. You've just inflated your lifestyle to match your income. In this scenario, if you were saving, say, 10% of your income at the beginning, $6,000 a year, you're still saving about 10% at the end, which is now $14,500 a year. Over those 30 years, with a reasonable investment return, you might accumulate around $700,000. Not bad, better than nothing. But here's the second scenario. Every time you get a raise, you redirect 50% of it to savings and investments. Your lifestyle still improves, you're spending that other 50%, but it improves at half the rate of your income growth. In this scenario, your savings rate doesn't stay at 10%. It gradually increases as your income grows. By the time you're 60, you might be saving 25 or 30% of your income, and the compound effect of this is absolutely massive. Instead of $700,000, you could easily have $1.2 or $1.5 million, maybe more depending on investment returns. Same career, same raises, same person. The only difference is what happens the moment each raise hits your bank account. And look, I know these numbers can feel abstract. $1 million 30 years from now doesn't hit the same way as an extra $300 in your checking account this month. That's part of why this is so hard. The psychological payoff of saving is distant and intangible. The psychological payoff of upgrading your life is immediate and concrete. But here's another way to think about it that might land differently. That extra money you accumulate by redirecting your raises, that's not just retirement money. That's I can leave a job I hate money. That's I can take 6 months off to figure out what I actually want to do money. That's I can help my kids with college money. That's I don't have to stress about a major car repair or medical bill money. It's freedom, basically. Options. And the cost of that freedom is not getting to feel the little dopamine hit of upgrading your life every time you get a raise. When you frame it that way, the trade-off starts to look different, doesn't it? So let me bring this all together because I know we've covered a lot of ground and I want to make sure the key points don't get lost in all the details. The fundamental insight here is this. How you handle your raises matters more than almost any other financial decision you'll make over the course of your career. Not because any single raise is going to make or break your financial future, but because the pattern you establish, either consciously or unconsciously, compounds over decades. Most people let their raises evaporate into lifestyle creep. They unconsciously upgrade their baseline standard of living each time their income increases, and they end up on this treadmill where they're always making more but never feeling like they're getting ahead. They're essentially running in place financially, just at a nicer gym. The alternative is to intercept your raises before they hit your checking account, to automatically redirect at least half of each raise to savings, investments, or debt payoff, to let your lifestyle improve but at a slower rate than your income grows. This is how you actually build wealth. This is how you create options for yourself. This is how you get off the treadmill. And look, I'm not going to pretend this is easy. It requires going against some pretty deeply wired psychological impulses. It requires accepting delayed gratification in a culture that's built around immediate satisfaction. It requires trusting that your future self will be grateful for the choices your present self makes,
even when your present self really just wants to order nicer takeout and upgrade to the premium streaming package. But here's what I've noticed, both in my own life and in watching other people navigate this. The regret almost always goes one direction. I've never met someone in their 40s or 50s who said, I really wish I'd spent more of my raises on lifestyle upgrades in my 30s. But I've met dozens of people who've said some version of, I can't believe I let all that money just disappear. I wish I'd been more intentional about it. The good news is, it's never too late to change the pattern. Whether you're getting your first raise or your 20th, whether you're 25 or 55, the principle is the same. The next raise you get is an opportunity to make a different choice than you've made before, an opportunity to prioritize your future self alongside your present self. You don't have to be perfect about this. You don't have to redirect 100% of every raise. Even starting with 25 or 30% makes a massive difference over time. The key is to make it automatic, to set up the structure before the money hits your account and before your brain has time to recalibrate around the new income level. And maybe, just maybe, consider that the real reward of a raise isn't getting to upgrade your lifestyle right now. The real reward is the compound effect of making better choices consistently over time. It's the feeling of watching your net worth grow instead of staying stuck. It's the security of knowing you're building something sustainable instead of just maintaining the same financial situation at a higher income level. That's the shift I want you to walk away with. Raises aren't windfalls to be spent. They're opportunities to be captured. And the difference between those two approaches is quite literally the difference between building wealth and just making more money. So the next time you get that email or have that conversation with your manager or see that updated salary figure in your company portal, take a moment. Before you start imagining what you're going to do with the extra money, before your brain recalibrates around the new number, set up that automatic transfer. Make the money disappear into your future. Your future self will thank you. Trust me on that one.